watery stool in a 24 hours period is known as diarrhea. So during diarrhea, patient may pass 3 or more loose or watery stool during 24 hours of period. And so so what are the causes of diarrhea? So maybe it may be due to decrease in electrolytes and water absorption. So diarrhea may be due to decrease in absorption of water and electrolytes, and it may also be due to increased secretion by intestinal mucosa. So there may be increase in water secretion from the intestinal mucosa, which may lead to diarrhea, or it may also be due to inflammation of the mucous membrane, and from that inflamed mucosa there may be leakage of the fluid, that is exudation into the lumen, which may also lead to passing of loose watery stool due to inflammation of mucosa and exudation of fluid from that inflamed mucosa into the lumen. These are the causes of diarrhea, and the main cause of death from acute diarrhea is dehydration. So none of the patients should dry due to diarrhea. Okay, we have to manage the case of diarrhea, and none of the patients should die due to diarrhea. And other important cause of death may be due to dysentery, or it may be due to undernutrition. And in dysentery, there may be loose watery stool which may be mixed with mucus, or it may be mixed with blood, which may lead to dysentery. And there are many consequences of watery diarrhea. So whenever patient is having watery diarrhea, uh, the diarrheal stool contains large amount of sodium chloride, potassium, and bicarbonate. So diarrheal stool may contain electrolytes like sodium chloride, potassium, and bicarbonate. And all the acute effects of watery diarrhea, it results from loss of water and electrolytes from the body in liquid stool. So whenever there is passage of watery diarrhea, there may be associated loss of water and electrolytes from the stool, and additional amount of water and electrolytes are lost when there is associated when the diarrhea is associated with vomiting. If the patient is having diarrhea and and the patient is passing large amount of water and electrolytes in the diarrhea, it may be more severe when it is associated with vomiting, because during vomiting also patient may be losing waters, and there may be water losses also if the diarrhea is associated with fever. Okay, so additional amount of water and electrolytes are lost when diarrhea is associated with vomiting, or there is loss of water due to fever. And these losses of water and electrolyte may cause dehydration due to loss of water and sodium. And there may be a metabolic acidosis during diarrhea due to loss of bicarbonate, and there may be depletion of potassium as well. And as I already told, dehydration is the most dangerous because it can cause decrease in blood volume leading to hypovolemia. There may be a cardiovascular collapse, and there may be death if severe dehydration is not treated promptly. So non patient should be their patient should not die due to dehydration. And it can lead to three types of dehydration, that is isotonic dehydration, and there may be hypertonic or hypernatremic dehydration, or there may be hypotonic or hyponatremic dehydration. Now coming to isotonic dehydration, so what happens here is it occurs when the net loss of water and sodium are in the same proportion as normally found in the extracellular fluid. In the extracellular fluid, normally what happens, there is equal amount of water and sodium. So in isotonic dehydration, it occurs when there is loss of water and sodium are in same proportion. So sodium and water are lost in same proportion in isotonic dehydration. And in the isotonic dehydration, it patient may have symptoms and signs of what are the signs and symptoms of dehydration in isotonic dehydration? So it is manifested by thirst. Patient may be very thirsty, their tongue may be very dry, and subsequently by decreased skin turgor, mean the elasticity of the skin is decreased. So whenever you see for the signs of dehydration, what do you see? Whenever patient comes to you with the history of diarrhea, you have to first see the signs of dehydration. So for checking the signs of dehydration, you have to ask the patient to show the tongue. Okay, and we can see normally what happens, the tongue is moist, but in case of dehydration, the tongue will be very dry, and we can see the skin, that is turgor. Whenever we pull the skin of the hand, I think everybody has seen the skin of the old people. What happens in old people, whenever you pinch the skin of the hand of the old people, and when we pinch and leave it, the skin of the old people will grow it goes back very slowly. Similarly, in severe dehydration also, what happens, when we pinch the skin, the skin will go off very slowly. That is the signs of severe dehydration. But normally when we pinch our skin and leave it, it will go very fast. Okay, so we have to see the signs of dehydration. And in dehydration, there will be decrease in skin turgor. Patient may have tachycardia, dry mucous membrane. Patient may have sunken eyes, that is, eyes will go inside, and there will be lack of tears. And in infants, there will be sunken anterior frontanel. When we feel the anterior frontanel of the skull of the infant, it will be sunken, and there may be the history of oliguria, that is, patient may have decrease in the urine output. And the physical signs begin to appear when the fluid deficit approaches 5% of the body weight. And as the fluid deficit approaches 10% of the body weight, then the dehydration becomes very severe, and there may be history of anuria, that is, there may be no passing of the urine. Okay, and patient may have hypotension, there may be fever and very rapid pulse rate, and extremities will be cold, and there may be diminished consciousness in the patient, and there may be other signs of hypovolemic shock. And when the fluid deficit exceeds more than 10% of the body weight, it leads rapidly to the death of the patient, because there may be circulatory collapse. So it has to be treated promptly, otherwise patient may die. And next, coming to hypertonic, which is also known as hypernatremic dehydration. So this reflects a net loss of water in excess of sodium. What happens here? There will be increase in loss of water. Water will be lost from the body, but there will be excess of sodium in the body. Water is lost more here, and it usually results from ingestion during diarrhea of fluids that are hypertonic. So during diarrhea, if patient is taking the fluid, excess amount of fluid, that is hypertonic, and if it is not efficiently absorbed, and insufficient intake of water or other low solid drinks. So during diarrhea, if the patient is drinking lots of hypertonic fluid, and if there is decrease in intake of water, it may lead to hypernatremic dehydration. The hypertonic fluid creates an osmotic gradient that causes a flow of water from extracellular fluid into the intestine. So there will be flow of water from ECF into the intestine, and leading to decrease in the ECF volume. So when the extracellular water from the extracellular fluid enter into the intestine, there will be decrease in the extracellular fluid volume, and there will be increase in the sodium concentration within the extracellular fluid. So whenever there is increase in sodium concentration, it will lead to hypernatremia. So what are the signs and symptoms of hypernatremia? So there will be thirst is very severe. Okay, the patient will be very thirsty as there is increase in level of sodium. Okay, so thirst is very severe, and it is out of proportion to the apparent degree of dehydration. So thirst is more severe than the stage of dehydration, and if there is hypertonic dehydration in the children, the child will be very irritable, and sometimes there may be seizure in the children due to hypernatremia, which is known as hypernatremic seizure. So whenever there is increase in sodium level, it may cause seizure in the child, and especially when the serum sodium concentration is more than 165 millimole per liter. Next, coming to hypotonic, which is also known as hyponatremic dehydration. So what happens here? Sodium level will be decreased, okay, leading to hyponatremia. So children with diarrhea who drink large amount of water or other hypotonic fluids containing very low concentration of salt and other solids, or who receive IV infusion of 50% of glucose in water may develop hyponatremia. If patient is taking increased amount of water which is low in sodium may lead to hyponatremia. This occurs because water is absorbed from the gut while the loss of sodium still continues. So, water is absorbing from the GI tract, but the loss of sodium is still continuing, causing net loss of sodium in excess of water. And there is deficient of water and sodium, but the deficient of sodium is more as compared to the water. Though in dehydration there is decrease in the water and sodium contents, but the decrease in sodium content is greater as compared to the water content, and the child is very lethargic, and sometimes child may develop seizure due to hyponatremia also, as in case of hypernatremia. Now, types of diarrhea. So there are basically three types of diarrhea: acute, chronic, and persistent diarrhea. So acute diarrhea, it is sudden in onset, and it usually lasts for less than 2 weeks, that is less than 14 days. And 90% of the acute diarrhea are infectious in origin. Okay, they are caused by infections. And chronic diarrhea, these usually last for more than 4 weeks. That is, if diarrhea occurs for more than 1 month, it is known as chronic diarrhea. And most of the cause are non-infectious cause. And persistent diarrhea means diarrhea which lasts between 2 to 4 weeks. That is, more than diarrhea which lasts for more than 14 days is usually known as persistent diarrhea. And what are the relevant pathophysiology behind the diarrhea? So normally what happens, sodium absorption and secretion of water and electrolytes, they usually occurs throughout the intestine. So throughout the intestine, uh, water and electrolyte are absorbed and secreted, and water and electrolytes are absorbed by the villi, intestinal villi. Okay, so intestinal villi usually help for the absorption of water and electrolytes, and water and electrolytes are secreted by the crypts of the bowel epithelium. So intestinal villi usually they absorb the water and electrolytes, while the crypts of the bowel, they will usually secrete the water and electrolytes, which causes two directional flow of water and electrolyte between intestinal lumen in the and the blood. So there will be two directional movement, that is the flow of the water and electrolytes in between the intestinal lumen and between the blood. And usually 90% of the fluid that enters the small intestine are absorbed. Okay, so whenever water enters into the small intestine, more than 90% of the fluid entering to the small intestine are usually absorbed, so that about only 1 liter of the water will reaches into the large intestine, and further there is absorption occurring in the large intestine, and only 100 to 200 ml of water are excreted each day in the normal stool. Okay, so what happens, water and electrolytes are absorbed as well as secreted in the intestine, and jejunum is the part of intestine where it is freely permeable to salt and water. So salt and water are freely permeable in the jejunum, which are absorbed secondary to the nutrients like glucose or amino acid, whereas in ileum and colon, sodium potassium ATPase mediated active salt absorption occurs. Okay, in the ileum and colon, primarily it occurs in the mature cell lining in the villus tips, and here water it follows isoosmotically. And in addition, glucose facilitated sodium absorption, it takes place in the ileum by sodium glucose co-transporter. So usually glucose is needed for the transport of sodium. When one sodium is transported along with each molecule of glucose absorbed. So glucose is needed for the transport of sodium. That's why in oral rehydration solution there is glucose sodium added together, because for absorption of sodium there is always the need of glucose. So one sodium is transported along with each molecule of glucose that is absorbed, and this mechanism it remains intact even in the severe diarrhea also. And bicarbonate is also absorbed by secretion of hydrogen ions, and sodium also accompanies the bicarbonate. Both are absorbed together, and potassium is it is excreted in the fecal water by exchange of sodium. So sodium will come inside and potassium is excreted outside in the fecal water, and potassium it is also into the mucus, and it is also present in the desquamated cells. So there is net loss of potassium in the fecal stool during diarrhea. So during diarrhea we have to correct the hypokalemia also, because lots and lots of potassium may be excreted through the loose stool. So we have to correct the hypokalemia, that is potassium loss, also during the treatment of diarrhea. And there may be osmotic load in the lumen. So whenever there is non-absorbable solid like lactulose, and whenever there is disaccharide deficiency, which usually occurs during starvation. So during starvation, when in the diarrhea, so whenever there is disaccharide deficiency or whenever there is non-absorbable solute like lactulose, there will be increased water content in the stool leading to the diarrhea, and there is inhibition of sodium potassium ATPase, and there may be a structural damage to the mucous membrane, which is usually caused by rotavirus, and this rotavirus diarrhea is usually common in the children, and it will reduce the absorption. And when there is a stimulation of cyclic AMP or cyclic GMP, there may be net loss of water and sodium, both either by inhibiting the sodium chloride absorption in the villi or by promoting the anion secretion of the Krebs cell, usually anion secretion, that is chloride ion secretion. Okay, and these Krebs or villus cells are the most important site of action of many bacterial toxins. Usually, bacterial toxins they act in this site, and it will enhance the secretion, leading to diarrhea. And sometimes prostaglandins and intracellular calcium also stimulates the secretion, producing diarrhea. And acute enteric infection causes secretory diarrhea. That is, in secretory diarrhea, there may be increased loss of water. Okay, and excess of bile acid also causes diarrhea by activating adenylase cyclase. And sometimes if there is change in the intestinal motility, or whenever there is increase in intestinal motility, it may also causes diarrhea, but it is secondarily important. Now coming to management. So whenever you are managing the case of diarrhea, first thing you have to see is the signs of dehydration. So treatment depends upon the stages of dehydration. So whenever there is mild to moderate dehydration, you can treat the patient with oral rehydration solution or oral rehydration therapy. And whenever there is severe dehydration, you need to treat the patient with intravenous fluid, because what happens in mild to moderate dehydration, patient is usually awake, patient can take fluid orally, patient are active, so they can be managed with oral dehydration solution. But whenever there is severe dehydration, patient may be in hypovolemic shock, patient may be lethargic, a patient may not be active, they may not be able to respond properly, and they may not be able to take anything from the mouth, and we have to treat the patient very rapidly. So in case of severe dehydration, we need to give the patient with IV fluid. And as And after giving IV fluid, if the patient is recovering very fast and if the patient is being able to take orally, then along with IV fluid, you can add oral rehydration solution along with IV fluid if the patient is being able to take it orally. And you have to ask patient how much of the urine the patient is passing during the dehydration, okay, during the diarrhea. And we have to encourage the patient to take oral fluid as soon as the patient passes stool. Okay, we have to replace the fluid loss. And for the treatment of diarrhea, therapeutic measure may be grouped into treatment of fluid depletion. So in diarrhea, as we know, patient may be losing loss of fluids. We have to replace the fluid loss, we have to treat the shock, and we have to treat the acidosis, and we have to maintain the nutrition of the patient as well, and we have to give drug therapy for the treatment of diarrhea. Now coming to treatment of fluid depletion, shock, and acidosis. So we have to, since the patient is in the state of dehydration, so our aim is to rehydrate the patient, which can be done by intravenous fluid or which can be done by giving oral rehydration solution. So coming to intravenous rehydration. So it is needed only when fluid loss is severe. That is, if there is loss of more than 10% of the body weight of the patient. So if there is more than 10% of the body weight, loss of more than 10% of the body weight, we have to give the intravenous rehydration. And if the patient is losing more than 10 ml per kg per hour of the fluid, we can give intravenous rehydration. And if patient is unable to take enough oral fluid due to weakness, stupor, or vomiting, so during diarrhea, patient may have weakness, they may not be able to take the fluid orally, they may be very weak and they may be vomiting also during the diarrhea. In that case, if we give oral rehydration solution, patient may further vomit. So we have to, in that case, we have to treat the patient with IV fluid. So the recommended composition of IV fluid is sodium chloride, potassium chloride, and sodium bicarbonate. Okay, so sodium chloride 80 millimole, that is equal to 5 gram in 1 liter of water. Potassium chloride, or we can give sodium bicarbonate in solution. So the volume equivalent to 10% body weight should be infused over 24 hours period of time, and the subsequent rate of infusion is matched with the rate of fluid loss. So whenever we give IV fluid, we have to see the fluid loss also, and we have to ask patient how frequently patient is passing diarrhea. We have to ask patient how frequently patient is passing urine. So whenever you treat the patient, you have to see the urine output also. Okay, so infusion amount should be matched with the fluid loss also. Okay, and we have to see what is the amount of urine passing, whether patient is passing urine or not. If patient is having decreased amount of passing urine, you have to increase the amount of fluid, because severe dehydration may cause renal failure also. So we have to give the intravenous fluid accordingly. So intravenous fluid are required only for patient with severe dehydration, and it is also given to correct the shock. Okay, and to ensure adequate electrolyte replacement, some ORS solutions should be given as soon as the patient is able to drink. So whenever you are giving IV fluid, after patient is being able to drink, have to add ORS solution to the patient also, even while the initial fluid requirement is being provided by intravenous therapy. Along with IV fluid, along with IV fluid, you have to encourage patient to take oral rehydration solution also. And the preferred solution that is given through the IV line is ringer lactate solution, which is also known as Hartmann's solution. It is the best IV fluid that is given during the diarrhea, and it supplies an adequate concentration of sodium and lactate, which is metabolized to bicarbonate for the correction of acidosis. So During diarrhea, patient may have metabolic acidosis due to loss of sodium by carbonate. So to replace that, we give ringer lactate, which contains adequate amount of sodium. It contains adequate amount of lactate, and this lactate it is metabolized to bicarbonate, which will help to correct the metabolic acidosis in patient with diarrhea. And the concentration of potassium, however, is low, and the solution provides no glucose to prevent hypoglycemia. So in ringer lactate solution, there is enough sodium and enough lactate, but the potassium content and glucose content is very low. So along with ringer lactate solution, IV solution, we have to encourage the patient to give ORS also, because it contains sodium, potassium, chloride, etc., so that it may along with ringer lactate. So when we give ringer lactate, it will correct the acidosis, it will correct the sodium loss, but it may not be able to correct the loss of potassium and sugar. So we have to encourage the patient to take ORS also, which may correct the hypokalemia as well as the level of glucose loss. Now, new ORS formula, you have to know the composition of ORS. It is very important. You have to know the osmolarity of the composition, and you have to know the ingredient and its amount. Okay. So WHO UNICEF ORS, it contains sodium chloride 2.6 gram per liter, potassium chloride is 1.5 gram per liter, glucose anhydrous glucose content is 13.5 gram per liter, trisodium citrate dihydrate is 2.9 gram per liter, and total is 20.5 gram per liter. These are the ingredients of oral rehydration solution. And osmolarity, so sodium 75 millimole per liter, potassium 20, glucose 75, chloride 65, citrate 10. So total osmolarity is 25. So administration of oral hydrogen therapy, is doing ORS at 1 patient swelling. So later it was reduced. Later the sodium content of the ORS was reduced and new ORS formula was developed. So you have to know the composition of ORS. So in ORS there is sodium, chloride, glucose, etc. So glucose increases the uptake of sodium and thus water by intestine. So oral rehydration is possible if glucose is added with the salt, and it capitalizes on the intactness of the glucose coupled sodium absorption. So as you know, glucose helps in the absorption of the sodium. Now, what are the principles of oral rehydration solution? So the oral rehydration solution, it should have an osmolarity similar to or less than that of plasma. So osmolarity of oral rehydration should be similar to the so to that of the plasma or less than that of the plasma, that is about 300 milliosmolarity per liter. And the concentration of sodium should be sufficient to replace initial sodium deficit in the children or adult with clinically significant dehydration. So in ORS solution, the concentration of sodium should be sufficient to replace the sodium deficient that occurs in the patient with diarrhea, either in the children or in the adult. And the ratio of glucose to sodium in millimole per liter should be at least 1:1 to achieve maximum sodium absorption. So as you know, glucose, it helps in the absorption of sodium. So the ratio of glucose and sodium should be at least 1:1 ratio to achieve maximum absorption of the sodium. And the concentration of potassium should be about 20 millimole per liter in order to adequately to replace potassium loss. So in diarrhea, there is increase in loss of potassium. There may be hyperkalemia. So the concentration of potassium should be sufficient in ORS to replace the potassium that is lost in the loose stool. And the concentration of base should be 10 millimole per liter for citrate or 30 millimole per liter for bicarbonate, which is satisfactory for correcting the base deficient acidosis due to diarrhea. So in diarrhea, there will be metabolic acidosis, so adequate amount of bicarbonate and citrate should be there in ORS. And the use of trisodium citrate dihydrate is preferred since this gives ORS packet a longer shelf life. So here you can see citrate is given here. So what is the role of trisodium citrate? So trisodium citrate, it gives the ORS packets a longer shelf life, so it is also added in oral rehydration solution. So how it is prepared? How do you prepare? Before preparing ORS solution, first you have to wash the hands with soap and water, and then you mix 1 liter of water. You take 1 liter of boiled and then cool water into a bowl, and then in 1 liter of water you add a 1 packet of oral rehydration solution. You encourage the patient to take ORS in sips each time when they pass the stool, and you have to correct the dehydration. Now, zinc in pediatric diarrhea. Nowadays we usually prefer giving zinc along with ORS in case of pediatric patient having diarrhea. So WHO has recommended that all children with acute diarrhea should be given zinc supplementation along with oral rehydration solution, and it has to be continued for at least 2 weeks. And zinc supplementation dose is 20 milligram per day for 6 days to 6 months of age, or 10 milligram per day for 0 to 6 months of age. So sorry, 6 to 60 months of age, and 10 milligram per day for 0 to 6 months of age. And with when it is zinc is given along with ORS, it reduces the duration of diarrhea, and it also reduces the severity of diarrhea. So if the diarrhea is prolonged and when zinc is added in along with ORS, it will reduce the total duration of the diarrhea period, and it will also reduces the severity of acute diarrhea in case of children, and it also reduces the reoccurrence of diarrhea for next 2 to 3 months. If zinc is given along with ORS, there is less chance of repetition of diarrhea for at least 2 to 3 months, because it reduces the reoccurrence of diarrhea when the zinc is given along with oral rehydration solution, especially in case of children. Now coming to maintenance of the nutrition. Along with oral rehydration solution, we have to maintain the proper nutrition to the patient. So patient with diarrhea should never be starved. We have to encourage patient to take healthy food, healthy nutritious diet along with oral rehydration solution. The when patient doesn't eat, fasting reduces the Brush border disaccharide enzyme. So whenever there is fasting, there will be decrease in the disaccharide enzyme, and it will reduce the absorption of salt, water, and essential nutrition. So decrease in disaccharide enzyme will decrease in the absorption of salt, water, and essential nutrients. So starving, it can lead to malnutrition if diarrhea is prolonged. That's why we have to encourage the patient to eat adequately during diarrhea. And feeding during diarrhea has been shown to increase intestinal digestive enzyme, and it will help in proliferation of cells in the intestinal mucosa. So we can encourage the patient to take simple foods like breast milk in case of children. If the patient is having diarrhea, we have to encourage the mother to give breast milk to the child. We can also give boiled potatoes, cooked rice along with it. We can give fruit juice, chicken soups, banana, etc. should be given as soon as patient is being able to eat. So uh, we have to encourage the patient to eat properly to maintain the nutritional status of the patient. Now coming to drug therapy. So drugs used in diarrhea can be categorized into specific antimicrobial drugs, probiotics, and non-specific antimicrobial drugs. And these are the drugs that is given during diarrhea. So in antimicrobial drugs, we can give norfloxacin, ciprofloxacin, ofloxacin, cotrimazole, tetracycline, and metronidazole. And in probiotics, we can give lactobacillus species, bifidobacterium, bifidum, streptococcus faecalis, bacillus clausii. And in non-specific antidiarrheal drugs, we can give absorbent like specula and methylcellulose. These are the drugs which has been given in case of constipation also, if you remember. And we can use anti-secretory drug which will reduce the secretion like resicadotril, bismuth subsalicylate, anticholinergic drugs, and octreotide. We can give anti-motility drug because increase in motility can also lead to diarrhea. So we can decrease the intestinal motility by giving anti-motility drug like codeine, diphenoxylate, and loperamide, and drugs given for inflammatory bowel disease. What happens in inflammatory bowel disease? In inflammatory bowel disease, patient may come with the complaint of diarrhea, or they may also complain of constipation along with abdominal pain, and there may be bloating of the abdomen. So the drugs for inflammatory bowel disease are 5-amino salicylic acid compound like sulfasalazine, misalazine, balsalazide, and we can also give glucocorticoids like prednisolone, hydrocortisone, and we can also use immunosuppressant drug like azathioprine, methotrexate, cyclosporin, and TNX alpha. And usually antimicrobial, that is antibiotics, are of no value in diarrhea due to non-infective case. If the diarrhea is due to infection, we can give antimicrobial agent, but there is no role of antimicrobial agent if the diarrhea is due to non-infective causes. For example, irritable bowel disease or in irritable bowel syndrome, there is no role of antibiotic. In celiac disease, there is no role of antibiotic. Similarly, in pancreatic enzyme deficiency or diarrhea due to thyrotoxicosis or rotavirus diarrhea, there is no role of giving antibiotics. Now, antimicrobial drugs are useful only in severe diseases like travelers diarrhea. And the travelers diarrhea, they are usually due to enterotoxicogenic E. coli. This is usually due to enterotoxicogenic E. coli. It usually occurs to the patient who are traveling. Okay, so it is known as travelers diarrhea, and it may also be due to Campylobacter. And for the treatment of travelers diarrhea, you can give trimoxazole, norfloxacin, and these drugs, they reduces the duration of diarrhea. Similarly, Enterotoxicogenic E. coli is a enteropathological E. coli is less common, but it causes Shigella-like invasive illness, and for this you can use cotrimoxazole or norfloxacin may be used in acute cases and in case of infants having diarrhea. Similarly, Yersinia enterocolitica, which is common in cold place, cotrimoxazole can be given, whereas the diarrhea due to Shigella enteritis you can give ciprofloxacin or norfloxacin, and Shigella infection usually it is associated with blood or mucus in the stool, which may also be known as dysentery, and it can be treated with ciprofloxacin or norfloxacin, whereas Salmonella typhimurium enteritis is often invasive and severe cases may be treated with ciprofloxacin or cotrimoxazole. Now, coming to probiotic diarrhea. So, what do we mean by probiotics? So, actually, the probiotic these are the live bacteria, okay, or it may also be yeast. Also, probiotic these are the live bacteria or yeast that are good for digestive system. So, probiotics are very helpful for the digestion. These are good for digestive system, and as you know that our body is full of bacteria. So our body it may contain either good bacteria or it may also has a bad bacteria, and probiotics are called good bacteria, or it is also known as helpful bacteria because they help to keep our intestine or gut very healthy. So it is known as good bacteria or helpful bacteria. So when you lose good bacteria in your body, for example, if you are taking any antibiotics to treat certain infection, so whenever you take any antibiotic for treating the infection, you may lose the good bacteria in your body, and probiotics can help to replace the good bacteria that has been lost due to use of antibiotics. So they can help balance your good and bad bacteria to keep your body working the way it should. So probiotics, these are the antimicrobial cell preparation, either live culture or lyophilized powder that are intended to be restored and maintain the healthy gut flora. So diarrheal illness and antibiotic use are associated with alteration in the population, composition and balance of gut microflora. So recolonization of gut by non-pathogenic, mostly the lactic acid forming bacteria and yeast is believed to help the restore this balance. So organism which is commonly used as a probiotics are lactobacillus, bifidobacterium species, streptococcus Coccus fecalis, enterococcus species, and these are the probiotics. Okay, so probiotics it can be we can buy it from the market. It may come in the powder form. We have to mix it water in the water and you can take it, or it may also come in the solution form, and we can use it to increase the gut microflora during the antibiotic associated diarrhea. And we can also get probiotics in curd. Okay, so curd is an abundant source of lactic acid producing organism. That's why we usually take curd during diarrhea because it contains lactobacillus, which act as a probiotic and it reduces the frequency of diarrhea. Coming to non-specific antidiarrheal agent like absorbent, antisecretory drug, and anti-motility drug. In absorbent, sphagula, psyllium, methylcellulose, antisecretory like Resisadotril, bismuth subsalicylate, anticholinergic, and octreotide, whereas anti-motility containing codeine, diphenoxylate, and loperamide. These are the anti-motility drug. Now coming to absorbent, you have already read it during the class of constipation. So it contains sphagula and methyl cellulose. So absorbent, these are the colloidal bulk forming substance which absorbs water and salt. So absorbent, it will absorb the water from the intestine and it will make the stool very bulky. So they modify the consistency and frequency of the stool. So it will modify the stool consistency and it will modify the frequency of the stool, but they do not reduce the water and electrolyte loss. It will not reduce the water and electrolyte loss. It will only modify the consistency and frequency. As that's why to maintain the water and electrolyte loss along with this drug to take oral rehydration solution. And specular and other bulk forming colloids are useful both for constipation as well as for diarrhea. Now coming to anti-secretory drugs, for example, Resica-Dotril, this is a prodrug. Okay, so since it is a prodrug, it is rapidly converted into thiophane, which is a enkephalinase inhibitor, and it prevents the degradation of endogenous enkephalins, and it decreases the intestinal hypersecretion. So during diarrhea, there is increased secretion in the intestine. So anti-secretory drug, it will, as name suggests, it will decreases the hypersecretion in the intestine, but without affecting the intestinal motility, and it can be given in a dose of 100 milligram 3 times a day for 7 days, and it may cause nausea, vomiting, drowsiness, and flutterness in the patient. Now coming to bismuth subsalicylate, this is a drug which was also used during peptic ulcer disease, as you remember. So bismuth, it is thought to have an anti-secretory property. It has an anti-inflammatory property as well as it has an antimicrobial effect also. And the mechanism of action is poorly understood, though it is thought to act by stimulation of absorption of fluid and electrolyte by the intestinal wall, and it reduces the inflammation of the stomach. It reduces the irritation of the stomach by inhibiting the prostaglandin secretion. It is used for the prevention and treatment of travelers diarrhea, but it is also effective in other form of diarrhea, and it is taken as a suspension, that is 60 ml. It is given 6 hourly, and it whenever bismuth subsalicylate is taken, it makes the color of the stool very dark, and it also changes the color of the tongue into black color. Coming to octreotide, so octreotide, it is an analog of somatostatin, and it is effective in inhibiting severe secretory diarrhea. So it will inhibit the secretion in the diarrhea, which is associated with hormone secreting tumor of pancreas like carcinoid tumor and the hormone secreting tumor of GI tract. So basically it will decreases the secretion, and mechanism of action appears to involve inhibition of hormone secretion, including and various other gastrointestinal peptides, for example, intestinal polypeptide secreting, etc. And octreotide, it is uses in diarrhea associated with carcinoid and vasoactive intestinal peptide secreting tumor, or for refractive diarrhea during HIV, during AIDS also. And octreotide, it is a somatostatin, it is a vasopressin, so it is also used in the treatment of bleeding peptic ulcer. So whenever there is history of bleeding peptic ulcer, we can use octreotide for the treatment of bleeding peptic ulcer also. And dose is 50 to 100 microgram, which is given subcutaneously 2 to 3 times a day. And it is and short-term drawback is short-term therapy leads to nausea. It may lead to bloating of the abdomen, and when it is given through the injection, there may be pain at the site of injection, and when it is given for long term, it can lead to formation of gallstones. Now coming to anti-motility drugs. So the role of anti-motility drug is to decrease the intestinal motility, so that there is decrease in passages of loose stool. So these are the opioid drugs, which increases small bowel tone and propulsive movement, diminish intestinal secretion while enhancing the absorption. So it will increase the tone intestine, and it will decreases the propulsive movement of the intestine. And major action mediated through the mu opioid receptor. So it is an opioid drug, so it will act through the mu receptor, and direct action on intestinal muscles and secretory absorptive epithelium are also observed. And delta receptor are promote absorption, and it also inhibit the secretion, and mu receptor it will enhance the absorption and decrease the propulsive movement of the intestine. And this is the anti-motility drug diphenhydroxylate. It is a opioid, synthetic opioid group of drug used as an antidiarrheal agent and available in preparation containing small doses of atropine. So it is diphenhydroxylate. It is always present in combination with atropine because this is a drug of abuse. It has an abuse liability. So to decrease discourage the abuse liability, it is always given in combination with atropine, and dose is 25 microgram atropine sulfate with 2.5 milligram of diphenhydroxylate, and usual dose is 2 tablets initially, then 1 tablet is given every 3 to 4 hours, not exceeding 8 tablets per day because it may cause addiction. And drawbacks is it produces CNS effect when used in higher dose. So it has potential of drug abuse or addiction. And if it is given in higher dose, it may also cause respiratory depression, it may cause constipation, etc. Now coming to loperamide. So loperamide, it is an opioid analog with major peripheral opioid and additional weak anticholinergic property. So it also has an anti-secretory activity against cholera toxins. So whenever patient is having cholera, there is increase in amount of secretion of water from the body. So it will help against the cholera toxin and some form of E. coli toxins also. Okay, so it will usually act on G1 link receptor and countering the increase in cellular cyclic AMP generated in response to these toxins. So loperamide it will be given in the dose of 4 milligram followed by 2 milligram after each loose motion. So whenever patient comes to you with diarrhea, you can give first. Usually it comes in a dose of 2 milligrams. So you tell the patient to take 2 tablets at once, and then followed by 1 tablet after each loose motion until there is decrease in the frequency of diarrhea. So first you give 2 tablets of loperamide, and then after, if for example if patient is having diarrhea, tell them to take 2 tablets and then wait and watch. If patient is passing stool after 4 hours, then you advise the patient to take 1 tablet after 4 hours, and you have to repeat 1 tablet until patient is passing stool. Okay, and the drawbacks are it may cause abdominal cramps, and sometimes it may causes rashes also, and it may cause paralytic ileus, that is it may cause intestinal obstruction due to paralysis of the ileum, toxic megacolon, abdominal distension in young children. That's why loperamide is contraindicated in case of young because it of children, and CRS are very rare. How do you prevent the diarrhea? So for prevention of diarrhea, what do you have to do? You have to maintain the proper hygiene, and you have to drink only